Kyra Edwards has raced for Great Britain at the junior, U23, and senior levels, and has won junior silver and U23 bronze world championship medals. She has a degree in statistics from UCLA and is training for the 2021 Tokyo Olympic Games. In this interview, Kyra and I discuss the similarities and differences between the United States collegiate system and the Great Britain rowing team. We also discuss how to improve diversity and inclusivity in the sport of rowing and her experiences as a Black mixed heritage athlete in a sport dominated by whites. Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast, a podcast focused on scientific and real-world expertise on training strategies between your ears, behind the oar handle, on the field and court, and in the strength and conditioning room. I'm your host, Joe DeLeo. I am a strength and conditioning coach, speaker, and lifelong student focused on continuous improvement. Thank you for joining me, and let's roll to today's episode. Kyra Edwards from the Great Britain rowing team. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy training schedule to join me. I've been really looking forward to sitting down with you. It's been a couple months in the making. So welcome. Thank you. And how's everything going?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Joe. I'm just having a good time here in England. It's pretty crazy with all the COVID stuff going on, but I think the GB team is doing really well at managing it, and I think we're still progressing in the right direction given all the different circumstances that we have going on. I'm really confident the team is making the most out of the situation and feel really privileged to be part of it, to be honest. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I imagine that it's been quite a shift, probably in the last year, going from, training at the center or doing camps to now primarily your training is at home. And so that's probably presented its own unique challenges. Do you want to start off by just kind of touching upon that and how you've had to sort of recalibrate a little bit maybe to make sure you're just staying focused and getting the training in?
Yeah, I think everyone has had a really different experience of how they probably coped with training in various different forms of lockdowns across different countries. And even within our team, I think we all had quite different circumstances going into our national lockdown in March, where we had several months of just not being able to leave home, in which time our national training centre closed down. So we didn't come together as a group from March till September. So that was a really long time to be all our own training programs, doing our own version almost of the centralized training program, given what we had, where we were, what we had access to, etc. For me, it was almost a bit of a well-needed break. By the time we got to March, we just finished Olympic trials, Olympic seat racing, and it was a really tough year of intense training and racing, and we were literally in the middle of Olympic seat racing when we got told to go home, as the world was shutting down, the country was shutting down, and the day after we got told to go home, we went into a national lockdown. So it was kind of crazy. I actually ended up spending a lot of time by the coast, which was really nice. I love the coast. One of the main reasons I went to UCLA was just to be by the sea. So it was really nice to spend some time. It kind of felt like a holiday being by the coast. And I think maybe I took it a bit too seriously. The scales definitely told me that. I mean, I was like, it was a really big year to come into the Olympic team, and it was a lot. And I think it all caught up with me. I was actually really ill pretty much that week. Could have been corona, not sure. And so I kind of had a period to kind of get over this illness, whatever it was, and build back up into training again. And so that was pretty tough, but actually kind of like its own blessing in disguise, because I needed that decompression from all of the intense year I'd had, and we'd had as a whole team. So once we kind of got built back into it, it was actually quite nice to have this whole flexibility in training as a team. So it went from just being like water erg weights every day to like I mean, there was a lot of erging involved, but a lot of the coaches are quite lenient in how you did your like cardio work. So it was, if you wanted to go for a run, go for a run. If you wanted to go for a bike or like a cycle ride, go for a ride. You could erg. Some people did various things. I tried out some open water swimming at some point, and so there was like so many options that it was really quite like liberating. And like going on long cycles is really nice. And just the option to choose what you got to do was so rare, I feel, in the sport of rowing. And
just
so,
about to ask. Yeah.
yeah. And so, yeah, freeing. And so that definitely had its pros of training at home. And I actually really enjoyed a lot of the time. But then it's been really, really nice and a great reminder to be back at the centralized training of why we're there and why it's so great, really. I mean, and it's so cool to be able to train with a team together, and it gives you a very clear purpose when you're there. You know, when you're at the centralized program, you kind of remember why you're doing this like 20k erg, why you're lifting around, throwing around some weights, or doing whatever you're doing. And it's really great to have a team environment where you can all work towards that together. And I think that's definitely lacking when you're training at home and sitting on an erg and wondering, why am I doing this to myself?
Right.
So yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but I'm really happy that we're starting to do a lot more training as a team back at the center. And but we definitely still got this whole element going forward of kind of a bit of choice in some of the sessions. You know, choose how you want to do it. You can do an erg if you want, or you can do like a bike ride, or you can just swim. And that's been like what looks to me as like a long-term change going forward. Wow. I think the coaches have noticed how like effective that can be and how rewarding that can be. And I think that's really cool that that's moving in that direction, and that's really cool.
So quick question for you on that is, do you, obviously, you know, part of being an athlete is being adaptable, right, to a changing situation. Do you think if the structure was as rigid and you didn't have the flexibility the past several months, like how would that have kind of changed? Like, just looking back, like, obviously probably wouldn't have been as enjoyable, right? It would have been a little bit more challenging. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. It's okay. So I mean, I was really lucky. I had a space to erg. I had a little shed, and so have a little shed, and so I think that was really helpful for me, is having this kind of separation where I could kind of walk to somewhere and start training, and I found that really important. I remember once I tried to erg in the house, and it was kind of weird, and the carpet and stuff, and I was like, no, this is wrong. This is where I like have my nice calming breakfast and coffee. And so it was, so I think like even just having like a place to train was really important. But then in terms of like the choice, I'm really having like the power to be like, okay, this is what I want to do today. I think, as I was saying, that was really liberating. If it was to just be like, okay, you have like 2 ergs a day, 1 weight sessions a day, I think that would have been extremely difficult. Like I think it would have been too much for a lot of people. I mean, I'm sure like most athletes, you can kind of like suck it up and get on with it kind of vibe. And that's a lot of what we spend a lot of time doing as athletes, I think. But in terms of having a healthy relationship with training and a healthy relationship with the sport of rowing, I think it was really important to have the freedom and the choice to do whatever you want. And if you wanted to do an erg, then that was great. You can do that too. I think and if you ever choose to do an erg, you know you're doing something right, you know? So yeah. I think it would have been exceptionally more difficult to have been made to do every single session on the ergo, or had no choice in it.
Yeah, that would have probably been pretty miserable. Yeah. Okay, so that's great. So I would love to get to know a little bit more about you, right? So obviously we know you're on the Great Britain rowing team. You mentioned that you rowed at UCLA in the United States, but tell us a little bit more about how you came into the sport, how you found it. Did you try other sports, beforehand? Kind of what was that pathway? And let's kind of get into the experience that you've had both in the UK and the US and how those are a little bit different.
Yeah, so I got into rowing at school. We did like indoor rowing, so erging basically, which is most rowers' least favorite thing. And so we did some of that, and I was quite good at it, like at the school. And we did some like school competitions where you race at the school. So you do that thing in teams where you like put it on the erg, and then someone holds your feet down, and then it's all fun because you're like 13 years old and you're having such a good time.
Relay. You did relays.
Yeah. Relay. Yeah, it was fun, right? And so I did that, and then you did some individual stuff, and I was quite sporty, so I played football before that, soccer, for the American people there. I was quite competitive. I played for Nottingham Forest, Notts Forest,
I'm not
team in
familiar.
England.
I'm sorry.
Okay, well maybe some soccer people would know what that means.
Okay.
And so it was like this little academy, and I got scouted for England a couple of times. I never actually played. I went to like the trials and stuff. And so I did that, and I had this crossroads where I was doing both rowing and football / soccer, and decided that I had to make a choice between one or the other. I think it was just more obvious that I was probably going to be better at rowing in terms of like at an international scale. And so I think that's what drew me to decide to stay with rowing. And I quite enjoyed it. And I was definitely I got into this cool little program, which we have in England called the START program, where they kind of like set you up for success is the whole idea on a pathway to the Olympics. It's like a national program done by like British Rowing. And so that just seemed the most promising route to doing something really special in sport, which I think my main ambition was. And then I did some
How old were you around that time? But when you were going between football and rowing, just as a frame of reference?
Yeah, so I started I think I first got on a boat when I was 13. And then the age of 14, maybe 15, I was deciding between the two. And then I think when I was 15, I decided to do rowing. And I got onto the GB Start program when I was 13. And then I started to I think it was very forefront in the whole GB Start thing, was that you used to do like junior trials and try and go to the junior world championships, etc. And so I did that kind of whole pathway. We had this little thing called GB France, which is like Great Britain versus France, when for like under 16-year-olds. And then I did this other thing called the Coupe de la Jeunesse, which is like a European kind of like B team world championships kind of thing. I did that when I was 16. And then when I was 17, I went to the junior world championships. I won a silver medal, which was really cool for me. And
Congrats.
So
awesome.
Thank you. And then so in that whole like time, I set some like junior ergo records or something, and so it was quite a good time I was in a good position for scouts by like American universities, which at the time was unknown to me. I was just pootling around rowing, just trying to do my best because I wanted to do the Olympics. And then all of a sudden all of these universities were getting in touch, and then it was for Great Britain, we were the first, my generation was kind of the first generation in the first year to really like flee to the US for university. Before that we kind of been taught, well, GB like juniors were told that if you were to go to the US, like you can't come back and go to the Olympics. It's never happened before. It never will happen. We don't really want you to do that. So we advise strongly against that. And so that wasn't really an option or in my like kind of realm of ideas of what I was going to do next. It was I kind of just applied to like English universities, kind of was on that track. And then all of my friends, all the rowers were starting to like go to like UW or Syracuse or some of the Ivies or Cal, maybe like a few, Stanford, like there's a few different places people were going. And I literally didn't even look into these universities because I didn't know anything about them. And then I just kind of kept getting these emails or messages and like not really looking into them. And then in January, suddenly I was realizing everyone was going, and then I was like, okay, maybe I should go. Like everyone's got this free scholarship. Like I should probably like get going with this. I had never taken an SAT. I didn't even know what SAT or ACT stood for. I still don't actually, but I was so unaware. Like I had no idea. And then I remember like it was. I think I literally didn't even look into the schools. I didn't even look into that. But all I knew was that LA had nice weather and was by the beach, and I was sold. That was it. So like UCLA had gotten in touch with me, and then I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I kind of want, like, I hadn't really thought about the competitiveness between schools, and so I hadn't really looked into like what the best rowing school was. I hadn't looked too much into what the best academic schools were. I literally just went to UCLA because I knew it was a good school and it was by the beach, and I stick by that decision because it was great.
That's awesome.
I love being by the beach, and I love having like so many days, over 300 days a year. So that was really good. And so I ended up rowing there for 4 years, and I graduated last summer. And then as I went from, I did under-23s each of the summers, and then my final summer, I like came into the team pretty much as soon as I landed back from LA. Raced at the World Championships and the Olympic qualification regatta. Didn't qualify the double that we were in. It was really like intense racing, really, really tough, but great exposure to the world of senior rowing. And then I've just been training the team, hoping to qualify either the double or make a qualification seat in the quad that's qualified this year. And that's my rowing history in a nutshell.
Wow, that's cool. What quite a journey. I do like that you chose a place that was like right by the ocean. That's probably one of the things I've missed the most in the Midwest is this is the first time I have not lived near a huge body of water, whether it's the ocean or the lake. And it's just, it just always adds something. It brings out just so much positive energy, and it's relaxing and everything. So very cool. You're very humble. So clearly a very good athlete. Like you kind of just sort of politely glossed over that you were, won a medal pretty early on and was setting some records on the ergo and everything. So you got your degree in statistics at UCLA. So how does the actual, how is the education experience in the US compared to the UK? And then also how is the rowing experience, both I guess in the pathway coming up and currently now compared to like the US collegiate system?
Yeah, I mean, I think both academics and rowing are, I think, starkly different in the US and the UK in several different ways. I think one of the main things is the link between them. I think with the US, academics and athletics are intertwined so well and so effectively, and that's just not the case in England whatsoever. Independently, I think the academics is so different. Obviously, in England, you just choose what like major or degree you're going to do, and then you choose that when you're like 17 and applying, and then you just go with that. And then you're stuck with that for the rest of your life, that choice you made when you were 16 or 17 years old. And I was so unsure. Like I applied for geography when I was applying for English unis. Wasn't like, I really liked maths, but I was never really pushed in the direction of doing maths at university, and I didn't really like abstract maths that much. And so I remember really loving my stats module in maths. Like I loved it. it was weird how much I loved it. People thought I was really weird. And I did psychology A-level, and that's basically just applied stats too. And I loved that too. And like, I was just such a weird nerd, but you know, I enjoyed it. So that was fine. But I never really thought I didn't want to do psychology, and geography seemed way more of a better bet to something with, and it was quite broad. So it would be something I could do something with, like, I think it would be more like environmental geography, physical geography. And so I was like, okay, I'll do this, that's fine. And then I came to the States, and you had this whole thing where you could like flip between subjects and choose which one you wanted to do. And I explored like every subject under the sun in the first year. And so like that was really fun. I'm quite someone who likes a lot of different things, just likes to learn in general. So it was great just to like learn, like I took one class on like earthquakes or something, and that was really fun. And loads of other stuff. And then in the end, I was like, okay, I did actually really like the stats module. I'll do the stats class. And I just remember just really enjoying this introduction to stats class. And then I took another intro to stats in a class and just had way too much fun. And I was like, okay, maybe I should probably do this as like a degree. And so then, I just kind of ticked all the requirements for the boxes and like took all the classes. And I really enjoyed it. And people don't really understand why, but it was nice to have people in my major who did like stats too. So yeah, it was good. And then when it comes to rowing, it's totally different. I mean, I really, really enjoyed the US system. It had its pros and its cons, but I really, really enjoyed this idea of working as a team, as a 40-person team. And the best person, the worst person, which is equally as valuable. And I think that's a lesson that's I've taken into not just like my rowing in the UK, but just life, and just valuing all the different people who are part of your team, regardless of what you think they do and don't bring. Realizing that everyone brings something really different and really special and important to a team. And that's not something I went into the US or into UCLA thinking I would ever value. That wasn't who I was when I went there. But when you're forced to understand that, it's actually so invaluable to really to be able to like learn from everyone and find importance, or everyone's important, but find significance in even the people who are the slowest on your team. That was a huge eye-opener, and I just found that I've taken that into the rest of my life, and that's one of the biggest lessons I'm grateful for in my time at university. And so like how you have, so in America you obviously have like 3 8s and a 4, and you have points, and you're always in an 8. And I'd gone from just being in a single the whole time I was in the UK. I was just in a single like every day until I came to like the World Championships or some kind of world thing or something. And like you just train to be in a single, and you train to get into like the crew boat in the summer, and that's still the ethic, and that's still the ethics of what carries through when I came back. Like that was still what people were doing. And so it was really hard for me to readjust to going back to the UK way of thinking, where it's just about being in a single and just about like doing everything just for yourself. So yeah, the fact that you're always in an 8 is really valuable. Sorry, did I answer that question very well? Not really.
You did, yeah. I mean, I think that the US has a reputation for prioritizing and focusing on the 8 quite a bit. You know, both at multiple age levels, right? At the junior level, then when you get into collegiate system, it's sort of all built around that. That's the quote unquote blue ribbon event, or the featured event. But definitely the UK and other countries around the world, prioritize development and a focus on small boats, especially on the sculling side. I've seen that more, I think, in the last, since I graduated in 2008, more of a shift towards the small boats, but probably more on the sweep side. So focusing on the pair versus the single or the double. But I think that also speaks a lot to that pathway and developing all of these athletes and these individuals coming up, to potentially be the next generation, right? Right.
Yeah.
Kyra, one of the points that you made that was very good, and I think is really important for younger athletes to hear, especially as they're a high school or a junior rower, is that you can provide a ton of value and significance as a team member, even if you're not in the top boat. And that can be as simple as your personality and the enthusiasm and energy you bring. So if somebody is, really good at having a sense of humor, that could be the perfect thing to inject, during a hard training session or hard training block when everybody is like exhausted and tired, and it just kind of cuts it. It keeps it light, right? Because everybody's working hard, everybody's tired, so I think that's a really good point to remember. And it sounds like, that may have been, just one of the many lessons that you learned during your time at UCLA.
Yeah. I think you summed it up really well.
Cool. Okay. So is there anything else that you would like to touch on in regards to like kind of significant or any other clear differences between the UK and the US collegiate system you think are, worthwhile for those that may be interested in, say, they want to go from the US to the UK and row?
I can't think of any positives to that unless you really hate people. I would never recommend that. So I don't know if that's worth saying, because I think that would be quite mean to all of the British rowing people.
No, but you're being very transparent and honest. So okay, why wouldn't you recommend it?
I guess it's not that I wouldn't recommend going to the UK. It's just more that I would highly recommend going to the US. From my experience, and I think everyone has really different experiences. But I think if I had to weigh up the two, I'd say and I haven't rowed in the UK, obviously, so that's speaking from just other people's stories. But to me, I think it's quite obvious that rowing in the US is a lot more beneficial. But everyone's different, and it's if you really want to do sculling, if you really want to be near home, if you're a British person, or you really want to get away from America, if you're an American person, then sure, there's definitely values within British rowing. But I think the competitiveness of the American collegiate system is just outstanding, and the boats you can race and the races you can get in the American system is just it's something you'll never find in Britain ever. Wow. You'll only find racing like it at the European Championships, the World Championships, just bow wall to bow wall, the crazy standards of like the varsity eights. I think I'm obviously very biased, but I just think it's if you really want an exciting rowing experience, I just think America is the place to be.
Cool. Well, that's good. That's good to hear. That's a good compliment for us. Okay, so let's shift gears and let's talk about creating more accessibility, more diversity within the sport of rowing. And this is something that you have talked about in interviews, in some videos. And I guess first, let's just start with why is this so important to you?
Yeah. So I think diversity is important to a lot of people. For me, it's obviously really important being a person of color in a sport that is dominated and pretty much only for white people, it seems, especially as a younger child. I think it's important for the sport, because I think all sports should be accessible to all people. And I think to make a sport that normally is only one race, one gender, one economic group isn't really how sport should be. That doesn't seem the way. The reason we have sport, it seems a sport should be for all. And I think if you really want to be the best at something, you should be able to be the best at something, regardless of who's in it. And it shouldn't just be one little group who you're competing against. It should be the whole world, if that's what you want the title of. So, I think diversity is important for me, because that seems just the way sport should be, diverse.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty straightforward and simple. So I guess my next kind of question to build upon that is, we've now, I think, really, especially in this past year, with all of the, social and racial issues, especially in the United States, it's become much more, aware. Like, folks are talking about it more, I think, which is the first step. Like, we need to have conversations about it and become, informed. And then, the next step is putting more resources towards it. So once we kind of have those two things in place, right? So obviously there's a greater awareness about it. They're putting designated, people in place in terms of positions or financial resources towards creating greater opportunity. So in your opinion, what's the next step after that? Like, how do we really truly make rowing a more diverse sport and have more people of color taking it up?
Yeah. I think you spoke of two really important steps, but I think the third one that I think is missing is going to be really hard to, it's really hard to control for most people, is right now when you watch the Olympics, or you watch previous Olympics and you see only white people standing on the medal podium, that doesn't invite any black people into rowing. Telling people that black people don't do rowing doesn't invite more black people into rowing.
Yeah.
I think the next step is to actually see people of color do well in the sport, like really well, like win the Olympics well. I think that would be this ginormous step that shows the world that this sport is for everyone. This sport is for people of color and can be done successfully by people of color. And I think that's this huge block in the road when you don't see people performing. You don't have role models that look like you. It's really hard to ever imagine yourself doing this sport successfully if that's what you're looking for. And I think we're definitely getting there. There's definitely been more racial diversity in certainly in European teams. I've seen it in like the European Championships. There was more people of winning color than I've ever seen before. And I think for me that was exceptionally eye-opening and exciting. And to see that I think is what will really start to bring the movement forward, is younger, or even just young university level people looking to start rowing, which is really common. Just seeing this is a sport that could be for them, because I think that's one of the big missing blocks at the moment. But I really think that's slowly happening, which I really hope I could be a part of.
Yeah, well, I think
selfishly and selflessly.
No, I think you already are. I think you are. I think you're doing it, and I think the fact that you've really put yourself out there is equally as important, right? Because it needs to be. You can't make things better if you're not talking about it and taking steps towards identifying a real problem, a shortcoming of a sport that's been around for, a few hundred years. And while rowing is fantastic, it can be quite insular as well at times.
Yeah.
So really kind of one of the things you're really talking about is winning, is we need to see athletes of color win. Right.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very concise way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we help our rowers of color? Are they getting the same opportunities, the same resources as other white athletes, or are those resources not being provided to them? Is that a potential shortcoming, or is it more along the lines of we need these athletes to really invest and put in more like years, right? Because sometimes rowing takes a few Olympic cycles to be able to get to the podium, right?
Yeah. I think the answers are quite different for the UK and the US. I think both of them are doing really well in some aspects, and I think the UK has, like I said, the START program, which was really useful to me, and I think is definitely supporting a lot more people of color than it has done in the past at the moment, and it gives it's like this whole program where you get a boat. They give you like a boat training, which is a huge fundamental, which is overlooked so often. I mean, they're so expensive; it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's not just Black people that are poor and can't afford a £10,000 single, but it's disproportionately the fact that, like, you know, people of color will have lower incomes, both in the US and the UK. So that's going to be a huge hindrance to people of color is the lack of accessibility financially and economically for people to have to be part of the sport. I think that's like a huge way to help, is not necessarily to fund like a person or to give someone money or sponsor them, but to create programs where it actually makes it possible for all different types of people, particularly people who can't support all of the costs of rowing in their family themselves, and be able to actually have the opportunities to be able to still thrive and not just like go for a social row on like Sundays when they have a chance to get a boat, but to actually be able to competitively race and row in a boat that is equal to all the people around them. And I think that's a huge part. And what's really good for the UK. With the US, I think, like, and something else I took advantage of, which is quite funny, is the scholarship system and Title IX, and which for me anyway, and just having a rowing team that's funded, and where the whole of my rowing career for that 4 years was funded by UCLA, as well as my academics. That's just like ridiculous. And so it kind of all comes back to money in many ways, which I think is really sad. But I think that's a huge part of it, is just like supporting different economic groups financially. I forgot what your question was.
No, you're touching upon it. Right? The question was, do we need to help provide like better resources? Like, is it being fair? Like, is do rowers of color have, and you're touching upon it, accessibility? And one of them is equipment, right? Because rowing's an expensive sport. Yeah. It doesn't matter where you're located in the world. Like, equipment's expensive. I mean, you threw out 10,000 pound single. I mean, it's borderline, around a car.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of ridiculous,
And then you need to also buy a car to get to training. It's kind of ridiculous.
It is. Yeah. And then you're not even talking about, like, that's just the boat. Now you're not even getting to the oars, or depending on what type of boat, if there's a speed coach involved or a Cox box, the Lycra or the unisuit that you need, because wearing certain types of clothing doesn't work, because if they're baggy, they'll get caught in the tracks, right? So there's all these other things that I think really fit under the accessibility part, and that's a huge component of it. And also, I think geographic location too, right? You do need to be near a body of water, whether that's a lake or a river, or something close to the ocean. So if you're not, then you need to have the means to be able to get there. So that comes back to your point about a car or public transportation.
Yeah, I think you highlighted all of a lot of the big issues that come along with lack of funds to support yourself in the sport of rowing. And I think that is quite unique to rowing and can explain a lot of differences between sports where you don't need as much equipment. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there.
That's great. Well, this is, I think, been super, super helpful and insightful. Is there anything that comes to the top of your mind? Like what are, besides the accessibility, which you touched upon pretty deeply, what are other things that we need to take into consideration to continue to provide, better pathways for individuals that want to take up the sport, so that these barriers are not the things that are limiting them. It's more just, okay, I want to try rowing versus I want to try, football or soccer. Like it's more of, that's where my interest lies, not, I don't have access to a boat, transportation, et cetera. What are other things we need to think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just accessibility. And then I think in general, the sport of rowing, a lot of the athletes or rowers, I think, are generally quite accepting of people. Because I think one issue could be like not being accepted within their own community. However, I can say I've never felt that, and I can't speak for every single other person of color who's tried rowing. But I think obviously conversations help, like less bias or weird stigma around it. And I think, like role models will be a huge step forward if we start to create those on Olympic level. And world championships level, seeing people of color actually do well and succeed in this sport on the greatest scale there is. I think that will be a huge step in the right direction.
100%. Yeah, for me, a huge role model for me when I was rowing in college and right after college was Akil Abdullah, and he was a fellow alum from GW, and the huge part of the reason that Akil was such a role model was, one, he came from a smaller school, within the U.S. that wasn't one that typically made it onto the national team. It wasn't like an Ivy League school or like a Cal or a UW where you had tons and tons of athletes, and also because he was a midweight. So similar to me, at the time, was he wasn't the biggest rower, right? He wasn't a guy that was 6'4" and had this incredible like ergometer score, and I think it was really cool to see somebody punching their own ticket in the single scull and being able to control their own destiny. And to me, that was things that I always kind of think about, is that you have that opportunity, and that's kind of one of the things that's cool about the single scull, and I always look to Akil for.
Yeah. Nice.
So I know you wanted to you had a question for me. You wanted to ask me, I guess, a little bit about Science of Rowing. So before we shift gears, is there anything else that you wanted to touch upon?
I think you got all the stuff, all the good stuff.
Okay, cool.
So.
Cool. So what question did you have for me?
I guess I wanted to hear more about all the work you're doing and what motivated you and inspired to do it, and the projects you're most excited about learning about, and what kind of research and conclusions you found that's interesting.
Sure. That's a lot. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So no, it's all good. So we launched Science of Rowing in August, and the idea came from one of our co-founders, Will Ruth. And, rowing is a sport that is really the training and the execution of a training program or training plan can be at times very traditional and dogmatic. And what we wanted to do was really follow the latest in terms of evidence-based science, and also provide this type of information to coaches and rowers at all levels. So we wanted to, one, make it accessible, right, and affordable, because a lot of academic journals are, one, behind a paywall, but two, you need to have a subscription to many of them, right? So that in and of itself, like, you could be spending hundreds of dollars just, glossing through journals. So the second part is to, one, we put in the time to do that, but then provide these journals with additional content around them, whether that's a video, an infographic, or an additional interview that we do with like key experts that allows a coach or a rower to turn around and put it into practical use, like apply it to their training, right? So I think that was kind of one of the big things, that we came together and we spent a lot of this past spring just sort of building our sample issue. And we had 3 journals that we reviewed, and we try to make sure we cover all aspects of the sport, at every level. And the more that we were looking into it, it's just, there's so much research, really around the junior and the elite ends. And there's starting to be more done on the masters. And absolutely there's a need for adaptive, but that's kind of what we're trying to do, is provide greater evidence-based knowledge out there for, rowers and coaches of all levels. And then in terms of what we're doing right now during the month of November, we partnered with the George Pocock Rowing Foundation, and they just brought on board Arshay Cooper, who has the memoir and the film, A Most Beautiful Thing. And so we're donating 100% of our monthly membership profits to the A Most Beautiful Thing Inclusion Fund. And we're trying to create more accessibility, more opportunity within the sport of rowing. And so what led us to that was we, as a collective group, we stepped back and we looked at all of these different initiatives that are available and out there. And for us, I think it always comes back to what aligns well with what we're trying to do, but also is there a natural connection, right? So all 3 of us were kind of familiar with, had either watched the documentary or read the book, but also, Akil is on the inclusion board. So there was a personal connection there. And so that was kind of the first, contact point. And then from there we had conversations and stuff, and we got the fundraiser underway and stuff. And we're, I think, really, really excited to not just put out a new publication, but also really trying to take some steps towards making the sport a better place, right? And putting action behind it. And that's what we're about.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. So I think I touched upon most of what you had asked me. Was there a specific research question? Because I know there was something in there that you were asking in terms of maybe particular research that we were looking at, or something that we might have found.
Like anything that's the most interesting thing you found that could change the sport of rowing, I guess.
Oh boy. Oh, that's tough. Okay, let's see. So we cover a variety of different topics each month. That could be strength training, that could be injuries. So I think the big thing that we're, that's pretty consistent across all demographics, whether it's junior, college, university, elite, or masters, is that low back continues to be sort of the number one injury. And I think we're getting closer towards, identifying better training protocols. So for example, there seems to be an inflection point, and Dr. Fiona Wilson's had some of this research shown in her journals, where it's a good rule of thumb, if you're doing a longer ergo session, to break it up and don't do a piece that's longer than 30 minutes, right? So get up, stand up, let your discs decompress, get out of that seated posture, that flex posture. So I think that, is something that we'll continue to spend a lot of time on, because injuries are such a big part of the sport. And I think as we kind of continue to know more about how they affect each different population and why, we'll be able to take better steps towards being proactive in reducing those numbers in injury.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. I think the other one that Will's working on this month that's pretty cool is he's discussing different models of training. So essentially a polarized model where you're doing like 80% aerobic work and 20% anaerobic work over the calendar year. And then more of a I'm going to mispronounce this, pyramid model, where it's still a high percentage of aerobic work, but then you have like a range where you're doing middle intensity. And so to me, I think that's extremely interesting. I've been fortunate to make some connections in the last several years with athletes like yourself all around the world. And I think there's, as they say, there's many roads to Rome, right? There's a lot of different ways to have success. And I think a lot about Denmark, my friend Mads Rasmussen, and he did not train a high volume training program. He was going through medical school, and, they would do one session a day, Monday through Friday, and maybe 2 sessions on a Saturday, and Sundays were off. And the only time they did, double sessions was when they went on camps, but still had a lot of success. Right. So I think it's interesting to be able to see, okay, you can still reach the podium, and you may not necessarily have to put in 20 hours a week. And I think some of that is identifying, what's the best way to do that for a country and the system and the resources they have in place. It's certainly not a one size fits all approach. So I think there's a lot more to it. I think it'll come back to kind of what does the national team want to do? What's available at the country? How's the country structured? Is there a centralized training location versus a decentralized training location? All those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's like so important in the sport of rowing. I think a lot of coaches miss the fact that not one training program can fit every single individual. But I think having talked earlier, I was talking about lockdown shaping the future of rowing. I think like lockdowns or isolations, etc. I think it does give you that more flexibility to maybe start to understand what is good for the individual. And so I can see that having an impact in England. I'm not sure how that will have an impact in the rest of the world, but I think that's given a definite insight into giving the people the flexibility. What is it that they need to get better, and what is it that actually is useful for their time? And so, yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think it's kind of something that it's really hard to actually put into research and put into paper how every person is different. And that's a bit of a rubbish conclusion, is that every single person athlete is different. But yeah, I think that really is the case ultimately, which is so difficult to actually explain and categorize people to different suited training programs. But yeah, I think that's great. It'd be really cool if you can do that.
Yeah, we'll see. It's a lifetime of work, I feel like.
Yeah.
But the point you just made, I think is 100% spot on. I would love to see, and that's one thing I've done more of in the last 6 months with Portugal, is providing more choice to the athletes and letting them have a sense of autonomy, because they're already in a pandemic situation. They're already operating under constraints, right? So you don't have access to a gym or the boathouse. You're training at home and out of your garage, right? And so you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to get in training and get and continue to take steps towards Tokyo and stuff. But you have to work around all these other things that you don't normally have access to. And it's like you said, the simplest thing of going to your shed or your garage to train versus your living room, that's huge, because you have a set environment. This is the training space versus this is where I have breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting too is that like most athletes probably subconsciously really know what's good for them without even, that's what I've kind of found is like, sometimes like you look to your coach, say, do I take a break today? Do I do another session? Do I do a hard row or do I do it easy? And I think deep down, normally you kind of know the answer, and no one knows yourself better than you. And so it's really hard to put that on paper. But good luck trying. That'll be so interesting to find out.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be a fun journey. I enjoy learning more about it and stuff. And I think that the goal for me, regardless of whether I'm working with a rower or an athlete from different sports, is I always try to take the approach of, I don't want them to rely on me. I want them to get to the point where I've passed on enough knowledge that they are able to think and act independently. And they just simply choose to work with me because hopefully they like me and it's an enjoyable experience, right? But it's a conscious choice to work with me as a coach versus like they're dependent, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge part of continuing to evolve as an athlete is, to your point, like knowing subconsciously, this is the feedback I'm getting from my body. I don't need to do another session today. I should probably rest more.
Yeah, really important.
Cool. Well, Kyra, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I think you got it all, unless you have any other questions for me.
No, but I just want to say thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. If this content is important to you, please be sure to rate and review so more people can listen. Also, you may follow me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook to get weekly free content. For more in-depth content, please subscribe to my email newsletter at my website, leotraining.io. Be sure to check out the resources page to download free, helpful content. If you have any questions or feedback, please contact me directly by email at joe@leotraining.io or via Instagram. The handle is @leotraining. Thank you again for listening and have a great day.